monitor questions. So on that note, as soon as this, give me a sec. All right, here we go. Hi, my name is David Pearlman. I am Director for Education Solutions at Microsoft. With me is
Heather Cox, Modern Workplace Specialist.
Stephanee Stephens, Modern Workplace.
Oh.
and our silent but steady Victoria Dean. All right, so
and a frozen face that way.
Team's technical specialist.
Excellent. So over the next 40 minutes, Jason Gutierrez, who is going to be presenting, and a number of his members over the next 3 weeks. So there'll be a break after our second week, and then we're going to have another team presenting on another subject. Really appreciate the UNT team, right? Taking the time to do this. We're going to learn. I'm going to learn. Andres is also on. I guess he's going to be on his cell phone, so he may call with some questions. Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you. You please introduce the subject and the matter, and we'll go from there. All right?
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
All right. Take it. Everybody can see my screen now. My name is Jason Gutierrez, and thanks for inviting me to share this. It's going to be quite of an experience here. You know, we've been working on this project for a year. It's been pretty intense. You know, we were trying to achieve a large goal in a rapid time frame. Of course, mostly due to COVID. You know, that was kind of the real kickstart to a lot of our digital transformation here. In this, I'm going to present over the next several weeks, as David mentioned, our three-part series on making the case. You know, this is our process that we followed. Your process may or may not follow this. I talked to another university yesterday who is following a different track, but essentially when we got down to the nuts and bolts of it, it's very similar, you know, I think for a lot of us. So, but I'll talk about how we made the case today, you know, to present to our leadership on this project, which of course has a significant financial impact on our university.
So Jason, one of the things I always get to do is try to help you be the best presenter ever. And I'm not sure that's always possible. Give us a little bit of a, how big is the university? How many campuses? Kind of some of those things would be awesome. Or maybe you're going to get
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So we have 3 main schools. We have one in Denton, Dallas, and Fort Worth. We have about 60,000 active members. Of that, we're talking about 10,000 DIDs that we're looking at moving. We have, of that, a good portion of those are actually going to be applied to people. When we did our discovery on this project, you know, we knew that there was going to be some analog left behind, but you know, the goal is to really consolidate our different telephony systems at these different campuses into a single, you know, platform. And that platform was Teams. And I'll go to the next slide. When we put together this team to move, we really had to pull across that whole organization. We, of course, had to get the you know, the buy-in from executive leadership, who was actually really driving this project, because you know, as we all experienced when COVID hit, we saw enrollment drop. You know, they're projecting, you know, budget shortfalls, and so we're looking for across the board for ways to, you know, to save money. And so that was really a big push for this project here. So, but we worked with, you know, executive leadership, of course, our procurement, budget, finance, all these people across the board are really our distributed areas, you know, in the second tier here with datacom, telecom, and our desktop support is really made up the bulk of the tactical teams that moved in this project. But in addition to our teams, we also had an extended team, you know, our implementation partner that we worked with. We also worked very closely with our endpoint vendor, telco carriers, and the SIP carrier of choice. So, you know, we had to interview a few SIP carriers, do some negotiation, and then we decided on the way to go. But a little bit of background. Pre-pandemic, we were already engaged in a Skype move. You know, we were moving from traditional telephony to Skype, but it was a very slow pace. It was very ad hoc. We actually started with OCS 2007 R2, and over time had accumulated about 1,000 users in that platform, but all on premise. And of course, the decision was made, well, we need to move to the cloud with all this for multiple reasons. Also, prior to the pandemic, our teams adoption was pretty low. We, of course, many of the IT areas and distributed areas were kind of using it as a tool, but the end user community hadn't really adopted it as a really productivity tool. That really took off, and I think we all saw that across higher ed, is that when we had to go remote, people latched on to whatever tools they could, and just to kind of keep business going. It was towards the end of the semester, classes were still in session, the business still had to kind of wrap up that semester, so it was a very awkward time. But we did see a lot of Teams adoption happen, and we partnered with Microsoft. I think actually even prior to that, Jethro Seeger, he came out and with a few other folks from Microsoft to do some in-person sessions. That was like in February 2020 or 2020, and then shortly after that, that's when we went remote. But we continued that in an online through Teams remote community. So we built a community around what we call the UNT World Teams Adoption, and just started to get the word out. We posted on our main website. We started to draw people in there and just be a resource for them to adopt Teams. So that helped to get us moved into the platform. We get that socialized. So when we looked at this this move, we were presented from the pandemic, a challenge. How do we save money? What can we do to accelerate our current plan to move to to support a mobile workforce? And what tools do we have available to us? And so that was what we were focused on. We had budgetary constraints as part of this, this project, because this would happen mid-budget year, so it was unfunded. And so how do we address that? So we had to identify savings. Our current financial model was a bit outdated, so we realized quickly when we did our analysis that we needed to change how we pay for telephony and how that's billed, and it's really more of internal processes. And by doing so, we were able to really squeeze out, the savings that we're seeing. One of the challenges, of course, is new endpoints, because now we're moving from this traditional or this, POTS line or telephone system to a VoIP-based system. And where we came from, we had 7 different voice systems, if you will. We had both VoIP, and we had at one campus in Fort Worth, we have VoIP there. We had an NEC system in our Dallas campus. We had traditional POTS lines and up in our Denton campus, but it was a variety and a mix of technologies that we really had to try to channel into Teams. And so with that, of course, adopting new handsets, there was culture shock. We're here, we have to translate or help them to translate using that, traditional device to either a headset or an IP phone, and then that becomes a whole new experience. Support also became, is a challenge that we had to address. Supporting non-traditional telephony. What is telephony now? We literally have in one campus, every single copper line's wired to a room. And so when people call 911, which we'll talk about in the third session, when people call 911, it's to the room. So that became the expectation across the whole enterprise, is how do we provide to the room? So how do we support that, and how do we provide that? But also there was some skilling challenges too, that we have to address from that traditional telephony world into a VoIP world based on Teams. So the process we followed in this first, and this is just in the first series, I'll cover this, is our discovery process. Talk a little bit about, financial modeling. We went through a decision and approval process. This is where our leadership had the opportunity to say yay or nay, and then or make modifications. But once that was approved, then we moved straight to architecture. We did a POC, and then we're off to the migration. And so that was the first hurdle, the first large set of milestones. So in discovery, here, what I have here is, some of the questions that we asked. This isn't a complete list of questions. Of course, there's many more that you could ask, but these are definitely the types of questions we ask. It's like, what is the service that we currently provide? So as I said, we had 7 different systems around our what we call the UNT world. And what is the cost to provide that? That's actually very difficult. It was very difficult for us to, suss out in our environment because of the various systems, the contracts, the billing systems that used to capture that. All that had to be brought together to try to come up with, a picture of what we pay. And then, from that, we would, of course, identify when we get to financial modeling what our savings could be. But we would try to determine what is our concurrent calling ratio. That's a question that's very difficult to ask when you're coming from an analog world. What are the options for dial tone? In terms of SIP carriers, because we knew we were going to go SIP. What are the needed components of a Teams voice system? So there is actually we have to do some pre-architecture discussions to try to plan out, and I'm sure this is things we all do, right? We try to plan out what it is we want to build. And from that, we can start to look at in the financial modeling piece, what it would take at a high level. So really what financial modeling is about, and the lesson we really learned, is that this is about, a high level ballpark estimate that shows in very broad strokes, the cost benefits of moving, from your current platform to Teams. So it's not a budget, which is important to know, it's not a budget. This is a model. It should be accurate, reasonably accurate, but, my advice would be here to ask for just a little bit more than you think it's really going to cost, but be conservative with your estimates there. Just ask for a little bit more, because there will be those things that you hadn't thought of when you were doing your financial model that may pop up. So some of the things you would consider is, of course, where can we identify savings? And so can we consolidate contracts, carriers, or renegotiate any contracts? Some people may be moving from PRI to SIP, but within the same carrier. And so that may have a benefit to it as well. Also think about recovering costs along the way. So, in our situation, we have 6 PRIs, actually 7 PRIs. And along the way, as we would spin down services, and for instance, when we moved all of our Skype for Business on-prem to the cloud, we were able to, at that point, spin down those PRIs and start to recover costs. Any kind of architecture costs, contracts, things you wouldn't want to pay, continue paying for. Another one would be for our Skype for Business on-prem, we had SBCs that were in our data center that the contract was going to run out on a certain date. So we made that a milestone point to make sure that that project was done. And then by that time, so we can, claim that cost, that we want to have to pay for that going forward in the next, as part of our continuing budget. But things that you may also want to pick up, and this kind of did get us a little bit, is just recognizing your early termination fees. You may go back and read your contracts again and look for those gotchas, because some of them may require you to pay out the rest of your contract year. And so as you put together your financial model, you will highlight that that if you do pull this, you're going to have to pay at this point this much money. So you may not be able to recover some costs, is what I'm saying. Also think about the vendors. Now, some people, I know this everybody's on here is super smart, and you might be able to just do this all on your own. that's great, depending what your timeline is. I mean, we've been in this platform for a long time. I think we felt very comfortable about our skill, but we were moving from our PRI architecture to a SIP with a different carrier. And actually, in our case, we didn't buy SBCs. We looked at that. We made a choice that this particular carrier we went with was providing that as a service. And so it saved us on some of our cost, which helped our model. So we decided to go in that route. And in that case, we did engage with an implementation partner. Really great crew, did excellent work, that got us to where we needed to be faster. So those are some of the considerations you may have. How fast do you need to get out there? But once we had all that data pulled together, then we have to package this up and give it to our audience. And in this case, our audience was what we call our operational effectiveness team, which is made up of our CFOs across the whole enterprise. And so these are the people whose hands are on the purse strings and are going to pay for this. And they said they had some specific questions they want to answer, and they want to see these savings that we were claiming. So be as clear as you can, like I say here in this block here, of course, clearly state the decision that needs to be made. Here is a little bit of background. We are asking for this. Here's the context and scope. This is going to affect our whole enterprise. It's not just one campus, but it's the whole enterprise. Here's some of the constraints that we have and the potential impacts. But then here are the success criteria that we're tracking. And this is our timeline to execute. And those are the basic nuggets of information that they needed, that our leadership needed to be able to make the decision. And so once we did that, we presented that. I put this insert project manager here. The first thing I wanted to do was go get a project manager, because once we had that decision, we knew this was going to be a huge project. We knew that going into it. But definitely a project manager was essential to try to keep this, this project moving, and kind of herd us, because we knew that a lot of the technical teams, you know how we are, we're going to get into that mindset, and we just need to have somebody keep us on track and make sure we're delivering. Because in addition to this project, we still have a shop to run, right? You still have tickets coming in, there's still classes going on, all this stuff still happens. So. But we needed to make consistent and marked improvement or progression through this project. But so once we got that going, the first thing we had to tackle was architecture. So in our financial model, we proposed, good, better, best solutions. We said that we can go this. We knew at a technical level, a couple of ways we can go. We looked at calling plans as an option that would get us there quickly. Because we don't have to worry about any infrastructure. We thought long term, well, we really want to go direct route. Then one of the other decisions we made was, well, do we want to do SBCs in our data centers, or do we want to have that as a service? And so we had to make the decision. And so we came to that conclusion. We decided, yes, we need to make that. Am I still here? Okay. I think my phone cut out. Okay, good, thanks. Yeah, my headset does this sometimes. Apologies. So we made the decision on a way to go. And of course, we got with our implementation partner. We engaged, we went through contracts. That took about a good 4 to 6 weeks to get through all our contract phases. And then we engaged with our implementation partner to really dial in the details on the architecture. And then, the first thing we wanted to do was get straight to our POC. We wanted to get some phones, some lines migrated out there, some phones working. So the team was, we were testing, our IP phones and our operations and maintenance programs before we got to POC. Because POC, that's where you fail fast, right? And I'll tell you a little bit about that. But some of the other things we had to determine during this is like, well, E911, that's a huge issue. And I think of the things that people like to talk about most on Teams is, how'd you deal with E911? What do we do with E911? And that's why we have a whole session dedicated to that and some of the work that we did there. Because as I said before, the expectation from leadership is that we give E911 to the room, which is more than, a lot of other places may require. So be tied in with your police departments. I'm sure you are. Yes, fail fast and build your migration strategy. And that's what our POC is all about. Now we had migrated, like I said, we have migrated 1,000 users to Skype for Business and then Skype for Business and online. But this was now, we're going to migrate to Teams. And so we had to modify our processes, update some scripts. It's basically the same, but actually in our experience, I think going to Teams through direct routing is a much easier process than going to calling plants. Don't know why, it just is. I think it maybe has to do with some of the time it takes to, for replication to happen with licensing and whatever, but it was just a real fast process. We, one of our points, and I'll show you here a little bit later, we did about 1,700 lines in one evening. It only took a couple hours. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, you build your migration strategy, and every time you do a migration, you're going to learn something. You're gonna make a change, and it's going to get better the next time. Even as proficient or prolific as we've become in migrations, and we've gone through multiple waves, and in the next session I'll show you the timeline that we followed and some of the waves. But little things happen, things change, products get updated, new releases come out. I think we've been very tied in with Microsoft on this whole project. I mean, at the hip, and working with the product teams has been great, and getting feedback to them feeding back changes, and then we're seeing results of that collaboration in the product. It's been a great partnership, I think. But yeah, so in our POC, things we also had to determine is our project risks and also those measurements of success, right? And so here in the block, start thinking early about how we want to deliver the voice, making decisions around E911 endpoints. We had to decide, do we want to be in the headset business? Headsets were, of course, really in demand, I should say. They were popular, but they were in demand, and they were hard to find during COVID. I think across all the manufacturers, the supply pretty much dried up, so it was very difficult. People were scrambling to get whatever they could from anywhere, and people were using literally anything, which kind of, you think about it, does have some impact on the success of your project, because that's part of the user experience. How does it sound? How easy is this product to use? So, but we did make some decisions around headsets, in that we worked with our headset vendor to negotiate prices and a set of headsets that users could choose from, because of course they make, the ones we want to make a lot of different varieties. Not all of them were being manufactured at the same rate, so we were able to work with them to secure through that supply chain from manufacturing to our suppliers to us, to make sure that they had the quantities at the time we needed them. So we would give them, lists of people. Here's how many people we're going to move for this wave. Here's how many people we're going to move for this wave. And then, the process we established helped to make sure that, if they ordered them on time, we would have those there. Because the last thing you want to do is, of course, migrate your people and then not have an endpoint or some way to interact with the system. So that was another lesson we learned and consideration we made. One thing we did do with regards to this project, it was a security risk assessment. It is, you think about Teams and security, it's like, well, really? Is that something I need to consider? Well, let's think about this. One thing that we know of Office 365, we know that spam, we know that phishing is a thing. We know that there is an attack surface that people exploit through Office 365, especially if you don't have multi-factor authentication. I hope everybody does, but now that you're moving your phone system into that, now if an attacker does capture one of your accounts, then they'll have access to your phone system, through that user's account. And hopefully it wouldn't move laterally enough to the point where they can actually get to your system itself. So what do? We had to identify what our risks were, what our controls were around that. And then we established things like, or used conditional access policies for certain types of phones. So if we have for instance, if we have a common area phone out in the lobby, well, we want people to use that. We just don't want them to use it from home, right? So we wouldn't want that number to, be used off campus. So we said, okay, that can be used on this subnet. We have some nurses stations where we said it's not appropriate for that user account. So we set up service accounts for those phones. It's not appropriate for those to be logged in outside of this clinic. So we could lock those down. But then some other lines, we would say, well, student workers use the service desk. They should use this from home, but let's say because they're working remotely. So we have a remote service desk. Well, so we have to loosen up a little bit on that. But those things can change. So those are the kinds of things that you consider, in the security risk assessment. It's like, how can this be used? How can it be used against us? So that's what we dove into and came up with some recommendations. So worked very closely with the security teams on that. And then this last bit here, we went to the migration, right? So now that we got through our POC, we were ready to dial in our first large migration. I think we did about 1,500 users the first one. It was pretty ambitious. Seeing as previously when we were doing calling plans, we would do about 200 or so every other week. Doing 1,500 at once was we felt was pretty ambitious. But once we got comfortable with it, it really we think we could have done more. It was pretty remarkable how easy it was. And so, here our migration, like I said before, our migration strategy, we established it. It did change along the way. We've got some interesting lessons learned that we'll actually, when we get into the next session, I think we're going to spend a little bit more time. But, we'll talk about some of the lessons that we did learn in that process, and how it ended up working for us. There are some things that you can plan on, I always say, that our leadership can propose a schedule, how fast they want us to move, but it's really the carriers that dispose how fast you will move. And so you have to really be tied in with them. We had an interesting issue where at one time, one of our telco carriers misread the port order. And instead of doing a partial port of just some of the numbers, they ported the entire block of numbers for the whole university in one evening. Now we were tempted, and Mac Edwards is on the call with me. We were tempted to push through that and just do it, but we couldn't because they didn't have endpoints, and it would have been terrible. But that was an interesting weekend because, of course, that all had to be undone. So those kinds of things happen, So being prepared for that. So one of the key things that we had to do along the way is keep leadership informed. And I'll share with you, let's see, I have this, let's click on that. My Power BI dashboard. This is, a tool that I used to try to keep everybody informed along the way. And so we would grab this data, we'd pull data from our moves, and then, of course, in Excel, then I would just, bring it into Power BI, created this dashboard so we can see along the way, our moves. So here's our first wave, our second wave, then our third wave. And of course, these are different campuses, our campus domains. And so I can say, well, this is how many people we went with on that carrier. This is how many Microsoft calling plans we had. Our wave one looked like this. And it was really a very cool tool. They enjoyed this. It kind of give them a good bird's eye view of a progress that we are making, along the way. This is how many total DIDs we have in there available. How many have been moved to direct routing, how many we have on calling plans, because we were still moving from calling plans to direct routing to, and all our area codes. So those kinds of tools are really great for leadership to kind of help them stay in touch with your progress. So That is, and then next time we're going to talk about the migration. Yeah. So I know we're getting close to time here, so I'll leave some time for Q&A. Kind of ran through a lot of stuff, but next time we'll talk about project management, building our team, how we did that, our strategy, tactics, process improvement, and then our lessons learned.
So Jason, awesome, right? I mean, this really, whether it's our stuff or somebody else's stuff, right? I know there's lots of different voice things out there. Every one of us on this phone call probably has teams in one way or another. It's really awesome. First of all, thanks for sharing, really kind of opening up the kimono a little bit. And listen, it's not all pretty, right? And, I know that Jason's going to get into some of that as we talk about best practices and things learned. But, these are the kind of things like as we can share them. This really is about selling nobody anything for Microsoft, right? We were kind of doing this, hey, call for topics, and Jason's volunteered a couple times and a bunch of other people do. It's just, so fundamental to this community. So here's what I'd like to do, Jason. We have time for a question or two. I'm going to ask some obvious ones. How many endpoints did you wind up putting out there? Soft or hard or whatever?
So I'll talk about the IP phones. So the IP phones, see HC campuses or medical schools about 700-800 on the other campus. So probably about 1,400-1,500 of those.
Mm-hmm.
Really we recognize that there would be a cost savings by going to headsets over that. And so, but this happened during COVID. This wasn't a normal, plan. When that happened, people, like I said, they scattered. They went and purchased whatever they could from Walmart or wherever. So by the time we moved, there's a lot of people we didn't account for because they already had something, and they already used our own equipment too. So.
Okay. And how many numbers did you port, did you say?
So we're at 5,500 right
Okay.
now. We have another migration tonight. We're going to do a small one, and then next week we're going to do another one. And then our last big migration is call center. So we're going to talk about, some of that. So when I talk about our complete dial, we look at all of our telephony, it's more than just dial tone. What do you do about fax? What are you going to do about a call center? What do you do about your remaining analog, life safety lines, E911, all that stuff you try to plan out because doesn't all go into teams,
Nope.
So it's a combination. It's a part, of things there.
Awesome. And so I'm going to ask these questions. You don't have to answer any of them. What was your what was the vendor partner that you worked with? And that's your call, whether you want to say who that is.
Well, we worked with several. So
Okay.
I'll tell you, we worked with Cloud Ingenuity to do our architecture and the build out and run our project. Fabulous company based out of Plano. We worked with Polycom and Poly, I should say, on the IP phones. We've been a Poly shop forever.
Okay.
And so we had a very close relationship with them. The carrier we went to, you may have caught that in the Power BI. We went with GTT. They're if you're in Texas, you contact your Learn network specialists, and you can go through Learn to get to them. They're great to work with. Very responsive, which is not something you normally say about a telco carrier.
Awesome. So
yeah.
So is your time wise, right, from the time that you started planning this to today, right? How far along? What did that timeline look like? And then what percentage of deployment are you from your estimation right now?
So I'll answer your last question first. We're at 78% of our population is moved into Teams. What we're doing, we're going through an audit of the remaining analog to create a punch list to cap this out, but the rest of it was mostly around call center. We have some life safety and that will remain analog, so there will still be some analog people, but we think there's maybe less than 10%, more to go of people. So, now the first question on the timeline. Well, we started this, COVID kind of pushed us into this, so we're over a year, but the real financial modeling and planning happened over the summer, right? We were kind of reacting to the pandemic at first and trying to get our sea legs. But we started serious that, and then our new fiscal year starts September. So that's when we actually got we actually got approval for this in August. September we hit the ground. we got through our POC before Christmas break. Starting in January is when we just started, steamrolling this. Yeah.
So January to date, you've deployed 70% of your environment.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's, and again, we talk about it, right? UNT is not like, how many people on your core project team outside of vendors and stuff?
Well, like I said, we had 77 people across our organization. On the tactical teams, we're probably around 40.
Okay.
30, 40. When it came to building out our port orders, getting the CSRs, getting all your, the phone numbers, then trying to match those up to people, we relied on the distributed network managers, our IT managers, to really help fill in the gaps there. Who belongs to this phone number? And we had several limitations when we don't have API access to our billing system, so we weren't able to go ahead and pull that out. So it was a manual process for a lot of that, and a very painful one.
That's awesome. So really, again, really looking forward to this. You might even want to think about at some point, right? This is a great topic for EDUCAUSE as well.
Saw the call go out.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I've already teed up, right? We'll probably do some kind of case study on your work, right? You'll have done all the hard work, right? The messaging, what it impacted. We'll talk about that offline at some point, but I've already talked to some of our marketing leads. But at the end of the day, right, it's really about, what are those lessons learned and the things that you did. So really appreciate, seriously, your team and yourself taking the time to kind of share, the bumps and the bruises and the things that you've done. So we'll take one or two questions and then we'll cut everybody loose for today. So from Marge Knox, sorry, go ahead, Jason.
If I could just give a quick shout out to our friends at UT Arlington too, because I see a few of them on the call. We connected with them early on in the project to get their feedback and their experience too. And so we're all in this together.
Awesome.
And so some of their experience, you're hearing in our story as well. So thanks to our Arlington folks. That's
great. That's great. So Marge Knox, one of your peers in the greater Texas area, I think, for grad students sharing an office, when we did those things, they had one phone. How did you handle it? And did each get a headset, or did you keep one phone in there for the grad students?
Yeah. Okay. So one of our challenges were endpoints. I think when I look at this migration, probably the thing that cost the most is endpoints. I built a tool. I won't go into too much detail, but basically you can map out who gets what. And at worst, it's $2.2 million for us. At least it's zero, right? You just don't buy anything. And what was decided is that because there was no budget for this, like I said, it happened mid-year. We tried to use revenue from our current billing system to work through the project, but it went to the departments. They purchased what they wanted. And so they made their own decisions. Yeah.
Awesome. So we'll take a look. We'll try to summarize Microsoft Office Hours teams. Maybe we could go through the chat channel and just pull out the questions. We'll send them over maybe and answer them as you can, or send them back to us and we'll get them in the Teams channel. This has been great. Really appreciate everybody participating. Jason, awesome. Love it. For those of you, I have another week or two left around Microsoft land and we'll continue to be lurking. But really appreciate everything this community has meant to me personally, as well as professionally. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. On behalf of Heather and Victoria and Stephanie and Andres and the rest of the Microsoft team, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And we'll end recording on that note. Have a great evening.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, David. Bye, Heather.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks, Steve.